Our guest, David O'Brown, has just entered the studio. Hello, David.
Yeah,
How are you?
welcome, David O'Brown.
Good morning.
How are
Thanks for
you?
having me, guys.
Very
Of
sharp.
course.
You look
Have a
very
seat.
handsome on camera. We were watching you before.
Morning, Joe.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. All the TVs are on.
Yeah.
What made you leave the Dallas Police Department and write a book?
33 years on the job, man. That's long enough. All of my adult life. My wife and I decided it was time to go do something else, man. And writing a book was about sharing my experiences with the police profession and the community I grew up in. So,
Did you find that, like, as time has gone on and in the place that we're all living in now, did the job become more difficult in the sense that with the way police are perceived and the amount of violence that you had to deal with in Dallas?
yeah, since Ferguson, Missouri, obviously the job's become more difficult, more of a fishbowl, even more hyper-criticized than normal. But while at the same time, the rewards of serving people makes it still more enjoyable to do the job. I mean, it's one of the few jobs where you can actually see the results, where you make a street safer, or you make like a domestic violence incident, you make a family safer. You actually get a lot benefits from doing the job, and it's worth the criticism.
Can you talk a little bit about what happened in, I think it was 2016 when those snipers opened fire on the cops in
sniper.
Dallas? Oh,
Yeah.
it really was only one guy.
Sniper.
Okay, I thought it was more than one.
We thought it was more than one initially, but it ends up being one guy.
Okay, and what were his motives for doing that, and how did you guys find the...
We believe he was a retired Army veteran. We believe he suffered from PTSD, and he attached himself to the Black Lives Matter movement in a perverted way and wanted to kill white officers, according to what he said to our negotiators. We negotiated with him for over 3 hours before we had to make a tough decision to take him out. Oof. So, again, he had killed 5 officers ambush style, just walked up on them from behind and shot them and killed them. And officers got into a running gun battle with him and chased him into a long hallway on the second floor of a building there in downtown Dallas. And I was unwilling to send any more officers down to have another gun exchange with him. He was very accurate, very well trained in what he was doing. I didn't want to lose another officer or have one seriously injured or killed. And so I weaponized a bomb robot with C4, about a pound of C4, and sent it down the long hallway and detonated and killed him.
Now, had that been discussed before, or was that something you just
Never
like,
been
hey,
done.
let's take a shot at this?
Never been done in American policing.
Wow.
Ever.
That's exciting.
And the commander on the ground and I were discussing how to end it, because this guy was threatening to kill more officers, and it was imminent in our minds that he was going to actually carry out that, since he's already killed 5. And they sent me several options, and I told them I don't like any of those. Be creative, and that was a creative option. And I knew that it was something that could cost me my job, but while at the same time, if you think about the options of sending officers down that long hallway and getting killed, or using a bomb robot, weaponized, it was the right thing to do, and I'd do it again.
So the robot is one of those robots that are used to get bombs out, right?
Yes.
But you put C4 on it,
Yes.
and it becomes a bomb in and
Right.
of
It's
itself.
about 3 feet in height, and it has two extension arms. You can just wrap duct tape around C4 with the arms with a det cord, and it goes down the long hallway. You got a remote det cord, and you got an actual attached det cord as a backup, and press the button. We ratcheted up negotiations because he was just yelling and screaming about killing us, and so he couldn't hear it going down the hallway until they got too close. Wow. And then we pressed it, and he looked around the corner, heard a little bit. He had his finger on the trigger, and actually a round went off as the explosion happens, and we're thinking he's still alive. And we still had to go down and check to make sure, but it was obviously very, very, very successful at taking him out.
But he had mental problems and was not going to stop.
He wasn't going to. We tried 3.5 hours,
Sure.
a long time, to stand there and hold a rifle at the end of a hallway, waiting for any moment, after working a 12-hour day, by by So this was
This is
beyond.
at night. People don't remember.
This is at
It's
night.
like 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night
Yes.
that this is all happening.
So our folks are exhausted. Every cop in the region comes to downtown to help us with this, and so there's no relief factor. And so we have to make a tough decision to end it. And again, like I said before, I'd do it again given the same circumstances.
And how long does it take to really realize what's happening? Because another thing people might not remember is it's a giant protest going on, and this guy is one of a sea of protesters in Dallas, and you don't know if there's a movement. Like you said, it's a guy who had perverted the Black Lives Matter message, but you don't know if he's got a bunch of guys with him. You don't know if this is a sect of that group. You don't. I
Right.
mean,
For the longest time, you're exactly right. We thought it was multiple shooters because many of the shots were at ground level, street level, but then he ran upstairs and shot another officer from the second floor. And depending on when you're arriving and what you're seeing, your vantage point, you may think there's a guy shooting from up there.
Right.
And then we know there's a guy shooting from down here. So for a long time, we thought there were multiple shooters. We had to do a very exhaustive search of our downtown. And to just throw more into the mix of an already bad situation, there were open carry, these folks that carry rifles in the protest marching
Ooh,
with
Texas.
AR-15s, Texas.
Yeah.
So there was about 20 folks with rifles marching
mean,
in the protest.
I remember
Wow.
that as the protest was happening and we find out that this has happened, a face pops up on the news because this guy is walking around where it's happening with a gun strapped to him, and we're looking for this guy, and then you find out he's just a dude who decided to bring his gun. He had nothing to do with it.
He had nothing to do, but he was wearing fatigues, a bulletproof vest, a gas mask. All these 20 folks were just kind of, protesting their right to carry, firearms.
Yeah.
And then when the shooting starts, they run. and the fact that our cops had enough discipline not to shoot them was extraordinary.
Yeah.
After watching your fellow officers being shot and assassinated in the street, you see people running with an AR-15, but you have the discipline to not take them out and to really zero in on the one person that was actually doing all the damage.
And what do you think is like the main problem? Because you hear all these stories that there's cops have shot unarmed black guys. What is the main problem between the black community and the police? Like, who's at fault, and like, what are both sides doing that's contributing to it?
And let me set the context before I answer your question. So we just recently had a cop in New York ambushed, sitting in a car.
Really?
Last week.
Just this past week, and then 2 days before that, we had a San Antonio cop shot and killed, ambush style. And so there's two sides to this grief, to this pain of losing people on the officer side and the citizen side, particularly unarmed black men, where that's the narrative that's been put out there, that's happening. But there are many noble, brave, courageous officers that give their lives to protect all of us as well. 5 on that one day in Dallas who gave their lives for people who were protesting them. Officers acted as
good
human
point.
shields for people who were protesting them. They ran toward gunfire for people who were protesting them. And so that's the context of this conversation about what's wrong. I think what's wrong is that there's not an appreciation for the sacrifice officers make and this difficult conversation we have about race.
Right.
It's a two-sided coin, and it's very difficult on both sides.
Do you think that cops should do a better job of when there is a shooting that shouldn't happen, when a cop shoots somebody that they shouldn't have? Do you think police should do a better job of acting less as a fraternity, not in a bad way, just meaning brotherhood, and more of a, look, this cop did wrong, they don't represent us, because there are so many good cops that it gets clouded when cops act improperly?
I did this as chief. I was the longest serving chief in Dallas since the 1940s in the modern area of Dallas. I fired more cops who just weren't suited for the job. There are some cops that's just not suited to handle stress.
Right.
The difficult decisions you got to make in a split second, is not suited to do that, and they make the wrong decisions. And unfortunately, they paint the whole profession with a broad brush, which isn't fair. Now, I know this is radio. You can't see that I'm black, right? So I'm black. I've been black a long time, all my life. So what I hate about what happens with black people, particularly black men, we get stereotyped. Walk in a store, security follows you, could think you're on shoplift, right?
Right.
But what I also hate about being a cop 33 years, I get stereotyped. You're stereotyped by the cops who are not suited to have the job. The 1 or 2%.
Right.
So it's the same stereotyping.
Exactly.
I hate both.
Right.
So
Both are unfair. Both are wrong. I think we ought to hold up the 98% of the cops that do the job the right way and would give their lives for you. And we also need to call out the ones that are not suited for the job.
Did you, when you were the police chief, did you have any incidents where you were going around and somebody kind of profiled you or stereotyped you wrong, and you're like, you guys have no idea who you're talking to?
Without knowing that he's...
Yeah, without knowing you're the police chief.
Well, yeah, and let me add to this. I grew up in the inner city, so I grew up in the hood. So I'm not like middle class or anything like that. And I've never forgot where I come from. So
in Dallas, you grew up?
I grew up in Dallas, in the inner city. So yes, a lot of times I've been stereotyped that way. As chief, before I was chief, I mean, it's something that you get used to, but it is not an excuse to be against the law enforcement community. That is not actually. It's a calling for you to put some skin in the game and maybe become part of the law enforcement community.
change
It's what
things
I
from the
did.
inside.
It's what I did.
Is that
I'm
why
an
you
inner
became
city
a cop?
kid. I'm an inner city kid. I wanted to be a police officer because of the crack cocaine epidemic back in the 80s. So I put an application in, and my first beat was my old neighborhood.
Wow.
That is what it takes.
But that's a difficult thing, right? If you show up in your old neighborhood as a cop, especially if it's inner city, if it's the hood, like they don't like cops, especially if one of their people is now a cop. I mean,
They got one on the inside now, so they're
Right.
probably like, "Hey, help us out." Huh?
Well, no.
Yeah, well, yeah,
It's some of that. It's some of that. You know, give a brother a break.
Yeah.
But it's also something where there's a expectation that you'll be treated fairly by somebody from the community.
So what
I
was
would be an advocate for more people from the community being a part of local government, policing, and other parts of local government to create the significant change you want to see. Protest alone won't cause that. It's when you put skin in the game is when you cause significant change in what is deficit in government.
Do you think people are having an honest racial discussion today?
No, I think it's called for, though.
What do you think is not honest about it?
It's not intimate enough. I tell this story about when I was bused and doing desegregation, doing integration in this country, and it was an awful experience. So I got bused to an all-white school. And until another 11-year-old kid, I was in 6th grade, another 11-year-old kid, white kid, invited me home for dinner, nothing changed. He invites me home to dinner. We become personal friends. It was a face-to-face, authentic relationship. That is what's missing in our discussions about race. We make it too broad.
Mm-hmm.
It's not David and my friend's name, who was 11-year-old, we're still friends today, Mike and David. It's the black guy and the white guy. It's
Right.
got to be more of an intimate relationship in order to overcome the wounds of race in this country.
Do you think, too, people are also afraid that every time, especially a racial discussion, if you say something that, you know, the other side or the other black guy says about white guy or vice versa, objects to, you're pegged as a racist or you're pegged as some, like, we don't give each other any type of leeway in a discussion
No
to have an
benefit of the
opinion.
doubt. And again, it's about the intimacy of relationship. I don't know your name. I don't know anything about you or your family, so it's easy to make those broad strokes about your motivations when you say something out of the way.
Yes.
But it's harder if I know you, I know your family, you know me, you know my family. There's much more of a benefit of the doubt. And a much more of I think a more deeper conversation about race when we are willing to get to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody wants to talk to you, Will in New York. I'm sure we're going to have some calls. I hope your headphones are up. Hello, Will. You're on the phone with us and David O'Brown.
Hey, how you doing, guys? Jimmy, Sammy, what's up?
All right, buddy.
David, I just, I don't know, man. I hear what you're saying, but I hear it's so lopsided. Like, I hear what you're saying, they're great officers, 98% or whatever it is, are great officers, sacrifice and give so much to protect us. But, I mean, it's lopsided, man. Like you had those, your initial answer to Jimmy's question is to mention the awful ambush that happened, the two ambushes that happened with the officers. But it's so lopsided, brother. It's so lopsided, and I never hear from the police community. I never hear you guys just come out and say, yeah, it's wrong. It's obviously wrong. Or yes, there is a problem. It's always first. Let me point out that. I mean, it's just hard. It's hard, brother. Like I grew up here in New York, and it's so lopsided. And you guys never want to admit or acknowledge that there might really be a problem. It's always, you always got to defend yourselves first, and then turn around and say, yeah, maybe there is a problem, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I understand what you're saying. Let me say this. Let me say this, if you don't mind. I'll be the first to say there are officers who are not suited to carry the gun and badge. There are. And I don't know if that satisfies you, but there are officers, and officers know this. Other officers know it's the guy I don't want to ride with because he always gets me in trouble. He always has me in IA over something he did.
I think the issue is that sentiment is never a public sentiment. Like
Right.
you don't hear that because officers want to defend the good officers, which I get,
Yeah.
and they want to defend the 98%. But in defending the 98%, the 2% doesn't get called out enough to make the people who feel like they're victims satisfied.
Right. So I don't disagree with you. But again, we depend on that 98% to protect all of us.
Yeah.
You cannot discourage them by painting them with a broad brush. Now I'm not willing to run toward bullets when you're running away from bullets.
Right.
And you think that we're getting a lot of money for this, right? No, we're not. 60 grand, 80 grand to risk your life. So we got to keep, we got to balance the conversation and not just make that 2%, it all about the 2% that doesn't deserve to have a job. I'd be willing to say it 100 times that they don't deserve to have a job. But at the same time, I've got to encourage the 98% to continue to run toward bullets, to risk their lives for us. So again, it's got to be a balanced conversation. I don't disagree with you though, sir. You make a great point.
All right, thank you very much, Will, for the call. Thanks a lot.
What do you guys think, or what did you think at the time of movements like Black Lives Matter, who are the whole point of the movement is to be critical of the way black people are treated by police, like that? I mean, they're doing something. They're doing it for the most part, in my opinion, in the right way, in the sense that protests, I think, are good. People should
protest. Make you
Peaceful
aware of a
protest.
problem.
Yes.
They don't create significant change. Since
No.
it started, what's changed?
Right, exactly.
We got a history of this. So if our founding fathers, all they did was throw tea in the Boston Harbor and didn't fight and write a constitution and create a government and then serve in government, we still be speaking the King's English.
You're saying they're protesting without
Alone.
taking the next step.
Without action.
What should the action be?
Again, I quit school as an inner city kid my senior year in college because of the crack cocaine epidemic and put in an application and became a Dallas cop to be part of the solution. You have to put some skin in the game. It's the history of this country. This is what the World War II generation did. They put skin in the game. They risked their lives to protect democracy from tyranny. You think about the civil rights movement. That generation of folks, they not only put skin in the game, they risked their lives, but then people like John Lewis got elected to government and been serving for more than 30 or 40 years. Protest alone is required in our democracy. I think it's something that is a tradition. And then the next steps are also as much an obligation to create significant change.
And your book, sorry, Sam, your book is called Called to Rise is the book that Chief David Brown is promoting, just so people know you have a book out which covers all this stuff in your life.
Yep.
And I'm only being devil's advocate here.
Please do.
I'm not advocating.
There you go.
But what about the people who think that action is that next step? I mean, you talk about the Boston Tea Party. The next step was violence. It wasn't joining the British government. It was a violent upheaval of the government. And I don't think that we want to encourage people to think that
let's keep it in context.
Yeah.
It's because there wasn't a democratic process to have what they saw as their rights not being heard. We have a democracy now because of that. And the democracy is more local. So the police chief, all the police officers are hired by people who are voted into office. So think about local elections. What's the participation rate? Dallas just had a local election. It's not dissimilar from New York's. About 6%.
Right.
Is a high participation rate in a local election. And this makes the difference on how the police treat you. You can hire and fire the police chief and all the officers if you don't like it, but you can't expect any significant change if 94% of the people stay home when it's time to make that change at the voting booth.
So you're saying the fact that we've set up a system where people actually have access to be a part of the political system and to be members of the political system is the difference.
It's why the Civil Rights Movement focused on the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
Because they knew that's where the change would actually come, with the right to vote. But then when the local election rolls around, it's single-digit participation percentage-wise.
Right.
You're not going to see any significant change until you invert that participation rate.
Somebody has a nice compliment for you as well. Let's see here.
I'll take compliments.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a guy,
$5.
Ron in Tennessee.
Hey, what's going on, fellas? How's everybody doing?
Hello.
Hey.
Oh, doing well. Well, I was calling because I'm listening to him talk right now. I listen to the show every day. I called Sam's show a couple times prior to him, being on in the morning. But my dad, he's a police officer as well. I'm a black man, so it's been a ride. He's been part of the force for more than 20 years. So, and I've always been kind of like a popular kid. So that's always been like being.
What is that? Sorry to interrupt you. The crackling
It's
is
the phone.
It is your phone. Okay. Can you move a location for a second? Because we're trying to hear you, but the crackling is really bad.
Okay, let me move. Sorry, I'm right near the radio. Can you hear me now?
It's just.
Do you want to hang up and call right back?
You have a staticky phone.
If you hang up,
buddy.
Ron,
Okay.
I'll take your call if you call right back. It's very the audio is really bad.
Will do. Sorry.
All right, thanks, Ron.
Is it difficult to go back to the job after an incident as traumatic as the shooting in Dallas was?
It is very difficult because we had to plan 5 funerals, 5 grieving widows and their kids.
Oof.
And these are your men.
These are, and it's been a year, but the wound is open and it's not healed. It'll forever change the Dallas Police Department.
Is that what motivated you to retire?
No, actually, it was time to retire. It was time to turn it over to someone else. I had done all I came to do. I had achieved the lowest crime rate of any chief in Dallas's history. It had a 70-year low murder rate in the history since the 1930s, and it was just time to move on to the next phase. Those jobs are limited. I believe that public service should have its limitations on how long you stay. Then you should turn over to somebody else with fresh, new ideas. And 33 years is a long time, bro. It's a long time to serve.
What were you right before you were chief? What's the rank right before chief?
I was second in command, the first assistant chief for 6 years prior to being chief. And I had been a patrol cop, kind of street cop. I wore a uniform every day. I'm old school. I was in SWAT for a very long time. So I at the height of the drug wars and the mass incarceration, I was right in the middle of it as a young cop.
And I guess in terms of coming up with new and fresh ideas, once that C4 robot gets introduced, you're probably thinking that's my brilliance.
That's my closer.
Yeah, you want to go out on top.
Right. Yeah.
Most of the time, chiefs are run out, tarred, and feathered now. So it is not an appreciated job. You make tough decisions. You make the cops mad at you sometimes, and sometimes you make the community mad at you.
Sure.
You can't please everybody, and you shouldn't be trying to.
Yeah.
So it should have its limitations, just so that it can be turned over to someone else that can kind of ease some of the things that you've had to make as far as tough decisions are concerned.
Ron is back on the phone. Ron from Tennessee.
All right, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, much
Oh,
better.
yeah.
Good deal. No, I was just calling to give everybody props, really. But the thing about it is, I'm in Tennessee, and I called Sam's show a couple times. We had, I want to say, when the incidents has happened down in Texas. My dad is a police officer, and I'm his son, so it's one of those things where I've always been caught on one of those things. He's been a detective for more than 20 years now. I'm actually going out for the fire department, but just give everybody props and say I appreciate what you did and what you done.
Thank you.
And keep doing what you're doing. Especially like I said, with race being such a big issue in this country, it's got to be trying for you. So now you're going through a lot. In addition, I'm gonna be at the show on Saturday too, Jim. So
in Nashville?
Man. Oh yeah, man. I'm
Okay.
in Clarksville, so about 40 minutes away.
All right, thanks, Ron. I'll see you in Nashville. I appreciate it.
We'll see you there.
All right, bye.
You were, I think, big on transparency.
Yes,
When you were
very much so.
when you were the chief, which is not something that a lot of cops
Right.
historically have been in favor
That's right.
of. But that I think that it's kind of brilliant to be transparent about it, because that is where a lack of trust builds, don't you think?
Right. Here's what I thought about police information, including identities of cops, the police-involved shootings, all the details. I thought it was the people's information, and we were caretakers. That it was never our information to keep.
Right.
That if we were truly public servants, we were supposed to serve the public, including all the information that belongs to the public. And I would be the first to admit my mistakes. If a cop did something that was outside the rules or the laws, I always had a rule: be the first to admit.
What is something you think you might have done wrong? Like as a chief, what's a mistake?
A
you
lot.
made?
I think one of the things that I have a lot of obviously tough decisions to make. I didn't do a good job with the media. I should have taken them out to more coffees and lunches and stuff to get along with them more. But
Were
I
you
did
dismissive of them? Or?
very, very, very dismissive of media. I just thought if you did the job the right way, that would be enough.
Sure, speak
but
for
it's not.
itself.
I was very naive in that area, and I wasn't very good at politics. I just made the tough decisions and let the politicians spin it in whatever direction and get involved in that. So if I had to do it all over again, I'd probably do a better job at smoozing with the media and politicians.
You felt the job would speak for itself, but they got to talk to them a little bit.
Right. And the media is your vessel of communication to the people you're representing, right?
That's right.
But they spin everything, don't
They
you
do.
think?
They
It's
do.
it's crazy how they're allowed to do that.
Right.
And we also want to. I wanted to ask you too. What did you think of the shooting that was on Facebook? That was a really a polarizing one where
Officer
he
Sterling?
panicked. Yeah,
He did.
he obviously
Not suited
panicked.
for the job. Not suited for the job.
Should there be? I don't know about jail for an officer, but it's like it's hard to say like when you just shoot a guy in cold blood that there shouldn't be any kind of a like if you're recklessly driving you can go to jail for it, right? So what do you think the penalty for a guy like that should be where he clearly made a terrible mistake?
Here's what I think's happening to jurors, and we don't want to change our jury system of criminal justice. We don't want to vigilante this thing. Of
course.
But here's what I think jurors are doing. They're making a calculation on this reasonable doubt standard. So to get a conviction, you got to be beyond a reasonable doubt. And where that doubt comes in is that, well, this cop risks his life for us every day.
Right.
And so he didn't come to work intending on killing somebody. And they want to give the cop the benefit of the doubt. And they transfer that sentiment to the legal process of beyond a reasonable doubt did they kill someone. And they shouldn't, but I don't know. That's human nature kind of playing on
Interesting.
jurors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're inserting emotion into something that should be by the book. Like I understand you get why and you feel sympathy for this person, but it's not a place for sympathy. That's why the legal system
And so you
is
get
set
these
up.
hung juries when we all want convictions in some of these cases.
But that ends up being worse, I think, bigger picture, because then the people who are not jurors, who didn't sit through the trial, who didn't feel the sympathy that the jurors felt, are just seeing perceived injustice as another cop that got away with it.
Right, but of course, there is a case, the Walter Scott case in South Carolina, where the officer took a plea agreement and got 20 years for shooting an unarmed black man. So there's,
But that was so egregious. And
So egregious.
from the back. It's almost
running
like
away,
no
lied about it.
one can spin that as to anything other than what it was.
yeah, right.
But
right.
part of it is, I think penalties have to be severe when stuff like that happens, so that because you feel sympathetic and you understand why it happens, because the job of an officer has got to be the most high pressure job in the world. Like you said, you are defending people. You're putting your life on the line for other people. But part of that, I think, pressure that you feel has to be, if I screw up, I'm going to feel the same consequences that anybody else would feel, if not worse. And it's just part of the gig.
Right. And so we're talking about jurors. Now DAs bring the case to the grand jury. You get an indictment. Now you're at trial. We're talking to jurors. So we're talking to everyday people in the community about this idea of the legal standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. Don't transpose that or juxtapose that onto, well, let's give him the benefit of the doubt because he's a cop and he saves us every day. He
Right.
does stuff for us every day.
It's, Jerry in Chicago wants to talk to David. Hello, Jerry.
Hey, what's going on, guys? How are you?
Hi, sir. Is your
Hey, I was
radio
giving a
off?
call and- I'm sorry?
Your radio's
no,
on.
I'm sorry. Let me turn it down. My
Okay,
bad.
thank you.
So I wanted to give a call, and I kind of had a question, but as I was thinking about it a little bit more, it went less from a question into a comment, and if you choose to respond, that'd be great, and I think you probably will. I grew up in the inner city of Chicago. I grew up in Inglewood. I've worked in the corporate world downtown in Chicago. I'm also a 10-year military vet. And, when I heard you make the comment about taking responsibility and kind of joining the force, I think that's a difficult thing to say, because when I was in grade school, I'll try to make it short. When I was in grade school, pretty much every kid that you asked what they wanted to be, they either said they wanted to be a doctor, a fireman, or a police officer. Mm-hmm. And I think growing up in the city of Chicago, one of the things that does is it taints when you're in an environment where the police officers just aren't nice to you. Mm-hmm. And I think when you grow up in that type of environment and then you see that these people aren't responding to you the way that someone should, and I think it makes it even worse when those people look like you do.
Yep.
There's been examples where I was going to play basketball with four of my friends. Police pulled us over because we lived in a high crime area. Police pulled us over. They searched us. We're out there for 10 minutes. And so I had a look on my face of disgust and unappreciation, obviously, because we aren't doing anything. We're high school kids going to play basketball.
Right.
And so the cop asked me, he's like, well, what's wrong with you? And I was like, well, you put us over for no reason, and you're kind of just wasting our time right now, and I don't feel like it's fair.
Right.
And then he's like, well, you know what's fair? I'll slap the shit out of you and write on the ticket because I fucking felt like it and take you to jail.
Right.
You know, at what point do I feel like, oh, you know what I should do? I should join the military. I mean, I should join the police force so I can help change this. In actuality, what it does is it makes me feel dehumanized.
Yeah, this is the conversation. This is the conversation I had with my old man. My dad, when I came home from college my senior year and said I want to be a police officer, he said, "You're making a mistake." He tried to talk me out of it. My old man said, "Police officers disrespect the community. You don't want to be a part of that." And my response and my rebuttal to my dad was, "That's why I need to be a police officer, because I want to change that. Because I want to change that." And my old man he was disappointed with me in that decision all the way until I was promoted to lieutenant. And then at my lieutenant promotion ceremony, he came out and said, "Son, you made the right decision. I'm proud of you." You know, it didn't make me cry, but my allergies still was acting up quite a bit, man. So it was a seminal moment for me because I had the same difficulty that you had in making that decision. Even when I went to police headquarters to fill out the application, the secretary looked at me because I was an inner city kid. I think I had a T-shirt and blue jeans on. So she looked at me and said, "They're not going to hire you," meaning we're not going to hire an inner city kid. And I was insistent. I demanded that they treat me the same way they would treat anybody else. I got hired. And I became police chief. And at her retirement ceremony, I handed her plaque with a smirk on my face that now I'm the police chief that you said we're not going to hire.
Did she remember you?
No, she didn't remember
She
it.
didn't, but,
I did.
But did you tell her that you told me this?
No,
or no,
I didn't. I wanted to now. I wanted to flaunt it, but I just had a smirk. And just thought to myself, you know, you said I couldn't be a police officer, and now I'm the police chief that hands you your retirement plaque.
And, David, I also thank you for the call, Jerry. I wanted to. Could you talk a little bit too about what happened with your son? Because you talked about your dad a little bit, and I think that was in 2010.
2010, a month on the job as after being appointed police chief. My son, who at the time was 27 years old, and was undiagnosed adult onset for bipolar, which is very common apparently in this country, and self-medicating with street drugs.
Which makes it worse.
It makes it much worse. They think it makes it better. People who are suffering from mental illness think it makes it better instead of taking the prescribed drugs. But my son was undiagnosed. The family, me and the rest of the family, was unaware that he was experiencing it. He living on his own, not in the house anymore.
Did you have a good relationship with him?
I had a good relationship. He was not a violent person at all. This bipolar mental illness is devastating to my family and to, I'm sure, other families.
Did you, in hindsight, do you see like, oh, that's what that was?
No.
So you didn't. There were no manic episodes growing up.
No.
Nothing.
No.
Really?
Adult onset. Yeah, it is the unique.
Adult onset.
It was sitting there dormant, and then it just hit him.
as an adult.
Man.
So about 27 years old.
Okay, so
Jesus.
Which makes it even more difficult to diagnose because he's sitting there going, "I'm 27. I'm not.
I'm grown."
Yeah.
And you can't make them do nothing. Even if you are aware, you know it's very difficult in this country. And I share that because there are other people experiencing that with their loved ones.
what happened to him? Like, how did you know something was wrong, or how did it get out of control?
He had what we thought was an epileptic seizure, but that is one of the triggers for this, convulsing and talking real rapidly, and he didn't know, we didn't know. We took him to the hospital. It calmed down and never happened again for a couple of years, and then this incident happens where he gets a gun. The only gun I had in the house was the gun I carried, so he got a gun from someone, I don't know who, and killed an innocent bystander and killed a suburban cop, and then was subsequently killed.
Wow.
And I'm in church, get the call from the detectives in the suburban city that this happened, and my life will never be the same. Yep.
Yeah, the gun issue too, and it's we all feel both ways about it. Like, and you're in a pretty open carry area, so people say that cuts down on crime. There's other people that say it's insanity. As someone who lives there and who's a cop there, what do you think?
I recounted that I had the lowest murder rate since the 1930s in Dallas, and it's a very liberal gun state. Mm-hmm. Almost everyone has a gun in Texas, and particularly in the urban centers. But then you go to cities like Chicago, a very restrictive gun state, and look at what's happening in Chicago. And in California, very restrictive. In San Bernardino happens. Mm-hmm. Go to Florida, and the shooting at the club there happens.
So open carry you're okay with?
Well, I didn't say that. I wouldn't go that far. I think here's what we ought to do. We ought to at least find a way to put some gun restrictions on things we all agree on. The mentally ill shouldn't be able to get a gun.
Yes.
Yeah.
We all agree on that. But that is not the law across this country right now. People, it is, you peel back the layers of what's happened with these multiple shootings, all mental health issues.
Yeah, forget
the
about
shooting in Dallas. This guy was mentally ill.
Sure.
PTSD, suffered that, gets released from the military with that diagnosis, but is able to get a gun. Sandy Hook. This person is suffering from mental illness.
And that's all
but is
diagnosed,
still
right?
diagnosed and still able to get a gun.
Took
That
his
is the
mother's
thing.
gun, yeah.
Yes. So this is all of what we agree on. I know the difficulty with, capacity magazines and assault rifles. I'm not talking that. I'm talking about the kind of the common sense approach to restricting people who are suffering from mental health problems, diagnosed, should be restricted from having access to a gun.
Okay,
Yeah.
now being the chief of the Dallas Police Department, you have it. Now, we talk a lot about conspiracy on this show, so it would be negligent to not ask you because of Dallas, of course, is where Kennedy was shot. And there's nothing that the Dallas Police Department got a terrible rap because of that, and they shouldn't have.
Right.
There's nothing that the Dallas Police Department knows that they haven't told everybody.
No.
aside
there's
from
not.
aliens.
There's not.
But I mean, isn't it? It's silly the way people think that there's this information.
But
that
don't let me
people
get in the way of a good conspiracy. Now, people live for that, so I don't want to ruin anybody's day that live for conspiracy. So, have at it.
But as a police chief, would it take too much effort for all of those officers to cover up something like that? Like, is it a possibility for a bunch of officers and the chief to cover up this whole thing with Oswald?
No, it's not a possibility. What I did as chief, because we came up on the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination during my tenure as chief, I went back and got the witnesses. There was someone in the Texas Theater, and then there was someone in a shoe store across the street. And they're 80 years old now, and they had never been acknowledged for helping capture Oswald. And I brought them in and did a big ceremony, and we talked about it to the media. We talked about what they saw, what they did, and how they helped the police wrestle him to the ground in the Texas Theater and gave him an award. And I got pictures in my office of this. And so Dallas had buried all of the history of the Kennedy assassination. And at the 50th anniversary, I began to start recognizing the people who were associated with it, including some of the officers.
Have you been in the sniper's nest? I know that they have it. They have
I
it
have.
kind of glassed off. Did you actually get beyond
Depository.
that glass?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. It's not a difficult sniper shot, actually.
It's not, right?
No, not at all. No, easy, a very easy sniper
So you're a
shot.
single, and I didn't plan on discussing this with you. But
I was former SWAT, so I kind of know this issue of what's difficult and what's not. And in the fall of a year, no tree foliage, elevated position, very slow moving cars, a very easy sniper shot, actually.
And somebody wanted to ask.
Well,
oh,
I was
go ahead,
going to
Cesar.
ask about the transparency we were talking about and being the chief. Did you have officers, and especially with some of your viewpoints on some officers not being equipped to have a badge, did you have, I don't know if the word's hostility, but were there...
No,
were
the
there,
word is hostility, yes.
With other officers?
The police union bosses, man, they
didn't like you.
They wanted to fire me from day one, every day, wanted to fire me, worked to fire me every day. They're my best friends now, of course. After July 7th, I'm heralded as this great leader, but every day wanted to fire me.
Up until then?
Yes.
It took, literally your entire career.
Yes.
Because you retired, what, 7
About
weeks?
7 months ago. About 2 months after July 7th.
Yeah.
So in October of 2016, I retired.
So you had 2 months of having them off your back before you went home.
Actually,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah,
2 months.
No. And then just holding officers accountable, you put your job on the line. And I was willing to. I thought that would have been, if they were able to be successful at firing me, that would have been a good firing. That would have been worth holding officers accountable, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That'd be great to send your resignation in with a robot.
We have to wrap. They'll tell you. So that, I
Thanks,
guess you have
man.
other press.
I appreciate it, brother.
David O'Brien was great. Such a fascinating interview. Chief David Brown on Twitter. And you're so honest and you're so open about everything, the good, the
Yes.
bad, and it's Called to Rise is the name of the book, and I'm sure it will do very, very well. I'm going to read. I wish we had it in advance. I would have read it just to be better prepped.
Thank you,
but-
brother.
And it was like, for those guys, I remember I was broadcasting, because I was doing nights at the time, and I was broadcasting live as the Dallas thing was happening, and just everybody talking about it and everything, and it really was to have not only lived through that, but led the eventual positive result of it.
Thank you very much.
It's an amazing thing.
Thank you
It's
very
an
much. I
amazing thing.
appreciate it. Thank you all.